it's just the purest form of self-expression. So it's like an impulse, like cleaning your teeth, or, well, that's not an impulse, but just like something that you kind of just do every day that becomes a natural part of who you are. And yeah, for me, it's like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, that's just life. Like life is just people and things trying to express themselves, and it's kind of like the easiest way, I guess.
I think we're always putting ourselves at risk, because you're always like experimenting and exposing yourself a bit, and I think that's the life of an artist.
I think also whenever you do because we don't do that many interviews anyway, and also I think whenever we do interviews, particularly after you've just released an album, you were like self-reflecting in the moment a little bit about the process. So you're almost like, it's almost like a therapy kind of thing where you're like, maybe was it a risk? I don't know. It's kind of, you think about those things.
But I also just don't know the answer. Like, I don't really know why I write songs. I actually have no idea where it comes from. I think that's the truth. So I'm always kind of making something up as like a response, but I don't know where they come from. They just come from somewhere and they come out. And apparently I used to do it when I was like a really small child. So when I was like in my car seat in the back of the car and I had just learned how to talk, I would be looking out of the window and making up songs about like what I could see out of the window. I think it's just something that I've always done. I don't know. That's such a good question. I think I'm such a mixture of the two. I think there are moments, especially on this album campaign, where I feel much more confident. I think all three of us do. And we're really confident in our relationship that we have with each other, and we really support each other. So a lot of confidence comes from that. But at the same time, I think just generally being an artist, I know that all three of us suffer with our confidence sometimes in different ways. And that's just, again, something that I think is part and parcel of making art. I don't think you can really make it without having those moments of like real crisis. And I mean, you get it probably. Dan will get it the worst, where he'll like make something incredible that literally sounds amazing. And I just see you just like, at first you're so excited about it, and then you start going down this rabbit hole of losing confidence. And then it's almost like you have to lose confidence to then re-find your confidence in the song again.
Yeah, it's a bit annoying.
It's like,
it's quite annoying.
I just think it happens. It's just what it is.
I do think also it's like a part of, I think I also just try to exhaust every possibility. I want to make sure that there's no better option for
that
whatever,
can be crippling,
which is quite annoying, because then it can become quite confusing. And you sort of, you lose perspective basically, which I think is quite a common thing.
So I don't think it's a weird question at all. Like it definitely is like at the heart of like us as a band. And I do think that, it's even for us, like there's a way in which also I think misogynism can affect men as well. Like, so I think that I certainly, when I was younger, I do feel like it maybe took me slightly longer to grow up, maybe, like in some ways than the other two. But like, I do think that, it's been such a process, and like seeing the way that like Hannah was treated, especially earlier on, I think like once you gain respect as a female artist, like then you start to be viewed through like a slightly different lens. But that's obviously a massive issue, because you shouldn't have to earn that right. Like, and I've seen that with Hannah. Like, I've seen the difference in ways she commands respect now to like that slight difference in the way it was before we started, even in the way that like you might ask a question about like the sonics of the album and like just look at me and Dan or something when we were starting out, and like that's definitely like been a real process of learning for me as well.
Yeah, I think the same. Just like basically just it's been a learning process, and like a lot of sort of self-reflection, seeing and sometimes quite difficult, because to recognise the misogyny in yourself that maybe I'd inflicted on Hannah. I know Hannah will probably say, "Oh, you've been fine," but I think even if it's like very subconsciously, because I was like like all boys, we kind of just grew up with that kind of in us, and you're sort of unpicking it. And I think like now, I think I've learned a lot, and I think I'm much more conscious.
You're a real, you're a real hard worker.
But no, it's been. I think it's very like revelatory kind of experience.
It was really hard, you know. I think at the beginning we weren't necessarily surrounded by the right
for sure,
people,
for sure.
and I think I also did watch a certain kind of toxic masculinity really affect the boys, and
yeah, for sure.
it doesn't. We've never fitted into that side of the industry at all. It doesn't suit us in any way, and I really feel like we've come out the other side of that, and we all really support each other, and yeah. I think basically what Dot said is really like hitting the nail on the head. I feel like the older I've become, the more records we've released, it's like I've earned this kind of reputation for the live shows, or like I've kind of earned this respect now, which is kind of messed up in a way, because when I was younger and very fresh-faced and had long blonde hair and would just walk into the studio like, hi everyone, like I felt like I was always immediately put into a box. Whereas Dan and Dot, it wouldn't matter what they looked like, how they turned up, how they sounded like, what their background was. I feel like they were taken more at face value, whereas I would be immediately put into a box. Whereas now, I feel like that doesn't happen to me anymore, which is great, and I hope that that's changed for younger female artists. I think it has done a bit.
I do think it has changed a bit in the industry, but what is also like kind of another difficult thing is like it's also the way that those young girls are like brought up, so like the way they are at that age as well. It's kind of like because you also learn to, you know what I mean, to like how to exist around in the music industry, and like they've also been treated like not just in probably in that one moment, you know what I mean. So
longevity.
Yeah, I think so. I think also just like a sense of, I think Hannah sort of alluded to it before when she was sort of saying, I do think we are kind of outsiders in a weird way. I feel like, well, I certainly always felt like a bit of an outsider in this industry. Like, and I think the band is almost, we've kind of been successful, but also like in a sort of, in our own sort of lane slightly. And I think this album, this whole process and the release as well, and also just maybe how old we are and how our lives have changed, I think we've just moved into a realm where we just can do what we want, or at least we feel like we can just do what we want. And I think that is a really beautiful potentiality of this band. We can just really exist and make art how we want to, and hopefully it just continues. But it's very hard to predict. You kind of just have to just
cling on.
I mean, it's a train. This thing is this whole last 12 years, 15, 13 years we've been doing it. It's just like a train, and you're just like, yeah. And then we're here.
Really? I feel like the captain. I'm just like,
it's like, I think our relationships are very, like, that also commands a respect in a sense, because you know, when people come from the outside, like earlier on, if I see a band like, when we did the shows with Coldplay, for example, like when I'm sitting like in a room with them, you wouldn't be thinking like, I think the business sometimes thinks how they can get in slightly so they could maybe get some more control or whatever. But I think when you've been like we have for so long, like as close as we are, that also commands a respect, which is difficult to come between.
I think we have a strong identity in terms of the music, but just not in terms of our image. I think every time we've ever tried to step into that world, it's a glove that just doesn't fit. And I think that's great. I'm really happy with that now. I do like social media. I think that there's some great stuff that comes out of it. Like, for example, I post a lot of art on there, and it's like really cool. But I just can't bring myself to go full. I just don't have the time. I don't know how people do it as well. I'm too busy writing songs to upload anything onto social media. I do have quite a good one. So Dot is very gifted at doing accents and has featured as a character in a really popular video game as a voice actor. And Dan, when he was younger, was selected to do a trial for a Premier League football club because he's so good at football. And there's a really good backstory to why it's not true. Do you want to tell the story?
That's so good. He smashed it.
But it kind of is like,
No, it's not. Yeah,
no, but you did do a trial, but just he
basically
he basically made out to me when we were younger that it was like this really like Premier League football. But
Basically, I lied to them.
No, he said it was Chelsea, but who was it really?
It was actually Watford.
It was Watford.
Yeah, not when I did it.
But still, he is actually an incredible footballer. He's like Messi, just like
Low
centre of gravity.
I
but
literally
quick.
haven't played football in 10 years.
Yeah, but he's still really good. But it was a lie.
But Dot is a voice actor.
I did a few for the games talking about. There was like Scouse, did a Liverpool accent. I've done a few games. I've done World of Warcraft. Did a game called Disco Elysium, which was a big game. Yeah, I've done about 6 games. I did Warcraft 40,000, which was like a big game.
Yeah, that is a huge game.
Yeah.
Haven't they just come out with a new one?
The last there was a trilogy, so I was on the 3rd one. I did a few.
Isn't that amazing?
So funny.
Because I've seen adverts.
Just doing like goblins.
Yeah, well, I was doing like some messed up priests and stuff. It was kind of crazy. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're the kind of man to fall in love with me.